Hello friends. So far we have been discussing the influence of temperature, particularly high temperature, on the properties and also the behavior of materials. If you could recollect, in the initial stages or the initial lectures of this course, we largely focused on the property of the material and its influence at or its changes at high temperature, how a temperature would affect a particular property of the material. After that, we moved into a specific behavior of the material. This specific behavior, even though largely it can be characterized as the mechanical behavior, it was different from other mechanical behavior in the way that it was dependent on the temperature. So when we moved from discussing about the influence of temperature on the property, we began discussing the time dependent behavior of the material to an imposed mechanical condition. This time dependent behavior, we refer to that as creep. So during creep testing, or the way we represented the creep testing was by considering the strain exhibited by the material over a period of time. Now we characterized each of these creep tests by fixing two parameters to be constant. One was the stress and the other was temperature. So after moving away from the influence of temperature on the property into understanding the behavior of material at high temperature, we began by considering the time dependent behavior of the material to an imposed mechanical condition, and each of this we refer to as creep, and each of the creep behavior is largely dependent on the parameters that we assume to be constant, that is the stress and temperature. So we saw that a representative creep behavior or a creep behavior of crystalline material largely comprised of three different stages, and we focused on one specific stage in order to understand the different creep mechanisms. So that stage was steady state creep state. So we focused largely on the steady state creep stage. So this is characterized by minimum strain rate. Now focusing on this steady state creep rate, we were able to relate the creep rate to the parameters that characterizes the creep testing. That is, we were able to relate the creep rate to that of stress and temperature. We saw additionally that depending on the combination of the stress and temperature, there were different creep mechanisms that are active. So each of these creep mechanisms, they related the creep rate to these parameters in a different manner, even though largely there was a power law relation between the creep rate and the stress that characterized the testing process. Now, in addition to the steady state stage, we also focused on the transient creep stage. Now, this shift in the focus was primarily because we wanted to move away from considering the life of the material to the strain exhibited by the material during the high temperature application. So we initially began by considering the steady state stage because that is the stage during in which the material would spend most of its life. So that is the reason we largely focused on steady state condition or steady state stage, and that is the reason why we consider the mechanism that is operating in that steady state creep stage, because it is in this stage that the material in a high temperature application would spend most of its life. Now when we want to shift our focus to the strain exhibited by the material, we moved to consider the transient creep stage. So life, we focus on steady state creep state or steady state creep stage, and for strain, if you want to focus on the strain exhibited by the material in an high temperature application, for that consideration we move into the transient creep stage. We focused on the transient creep stage and we arrived at certain relation that would help us understand the strain exhibited by the material during this transient creep stage or stage 1 of the creep behavior. Now, in the previous few lectures or in the last few lectures, we moved away from these two and began considering the failure of the material during creep. So we began considering what is the time required for the material to fail under a particular combination of stress and high temperature. Now, in order to understand the failure of the material, or in order to quantify the time taken for the failure of the material in a particular combination of stress and high temperature, we increase the stress considerably when compared to other creep tests. So this means the time required for the failure, it decreased. And this test we refer to as the stress rupture tests. So we moved away from understanding the time dependent mechanical behavior or time dependent behavior of the material. We focused on different stages. We focused on the stage wherein the strain rate was minimal. We focused on other stage wherein the strain rate was regressing. Now we completely moved away from discussing with respect to strain to an area wherein we are focused on the time taken for the failure of the material. Now even here we largely consider or related the stress to the time taken for the failure. And more importantly, in the previous lecture, we arrived at a relation that would help us identify the time taken for the failure in the general case from the data that we collect from the stress rupture test. So we can, because the stress rupture test or the time taken for the stress rupture test is considerably low when you compare it with the time taken for the creep test, it allows us to perform large number of these tests. And once you have large data sets, it is easy for us based on the Markman-Grant relation to arrive at or to calculate the time taken for the failure under a general creep condition. So this is what we have been considering so far. So this is the gist of what we have been focusing thus far. So what we have now done is we have moved away from considering the strain to the time dependent failure of the material, or you could say we have moved away from the behavior of the material during its lifetime to the failure of the material. So if you consider the different stages, we have considered stage 1, stage 2 and stage 2 largely, and now we are focusing on the final stage of the material in the high temperature application. So from this lecture onwards, for few lectures further, we will be focusing on the fracture of the material or the failure of the material at high temperature. So largely this failure involves fracture. We will be considering the fracture of the material at high temperature from this lecture onwards to few lectures further. So since we want to focus on the fracture or the failure of the material at high temperature, let us begin by revisiting some of the concepts that helps us understand the fracture at ambient temperature. So once we are fairly familiar with the general description of the fracture at ambient temperature, then it will be easy for us to identify the effect of high temperature on the failure or the fracture of the material. So we will begin by considering or begin by understanding the concepts that govern the fracture at ambient or room temperature. Now the fracture, we can define fracture as the separation or fragmentation of what used to be a continuous material or a continuous solid state material and using stress. So in this case, the fracture that we will be studying is mainly caused by the imposed loading condition or imposed mechanical condition, and this is nothing but separation or the fragmentation of a continuum medium or a continuous solid state structure. So this fracture, if you could recollect, we largely categorized into, when we are focused on the ambient temperature, we can largely categorize this fracture into brittle and ductile fracture. So depending on the material, particularly the crystal structure of the material, the fracture or the mechanism of fracture or the nature of the fracture would vary. So some material exhibit a brittle fracture while the others exhibit the ductile fracture. So one significant change that you would observe when you compare brittle fracture to that of the ductile fracture is the amount of plastic deformation that precedes the ultimate failure of the material. So in brittle material or in brittle fracture, it is characterized by a minimal amount of plastic deformation or minimal amount of any deformation. In case of ductile fracture, there is a significant amount of plastic deformation before the material gives in and fails. Now, if you could recollect our previous discussion on stress rupture test, and when we compared the strain that is observed between the creep test and the stress rupture test, we saw that the creep test rendered about 0.5% strain. So during creep testing, the maximum amount of strain or the average strain that you would observe is just 0.5%, and you would stop, or after the 0.5%, the material would enter into the tertiary stage, and then we would stop the testing. So 0.5% strain is what characterizes the creep test. However, it is more than 50% of strain is observed during the stress rupture test. Even though we have high stress condition when compared to the creep test, the stress rupture test renders more than 50% of the strain, and therefore even at the adverse conditions like stress rupture test. So stress rupture test is adverse because we are imposing high amount of stress even when compared to the creep test. The material fails in a ductile manner. You would be able to see a sufficient amount of plastic deformation before the material fails, and therefore even though in general sense or in ambient temperature it is possible for us to observe brittle fracture and ductile fracture depending on the material, we will be largely focusing on the ductile fracture. And again, this we exclusively focus on the ductile fracture because even in the very high stress condition, even in the extremely high stress condition, because if you could recollect the creep test in itself, we impose a condition in creep test in itself wherein it is the stress is quite considerably high when you compare it to the application, because we don't want to have a duration that is something, or a creep test that is being carried out for a duration that is equivalent to the life of the material and application, and therefore even in the creep test we increase the stress that is involved. We increase that considerable amount of times in the stress rupture test, and even in such a condition you observe a significant amount of strain. And even in such a condition, since we observe a significant amount of strain, it means that at high temperature the ductile fracture is one that largely operates, and that's the reason why in this discussion we will be focusing on the ductile fracture. Now, irrespective of the mode of fracture, the nature of the fracture, the mechanism that governs it comprises of two aspects. One is the crack nucleation, the other is the propagation. So you have two mechanisms that operates sequentially in order to bring about the crack, and ultimately the crack, it's the crack that grows and leads to the failure of the material or the fracture of the material. So this crack or the fracture begins with the nucleation of the crack, or the mechanism of failure, particularly or irrespective of the mode, be it the brittle or ductile. It begins with the formation of the crack or the nucleation of the crack, and ultimately and subsequently the propagation of the crack, which ultimately leads to the failure of the material. Now, when compared to the brittle fracture, the ductile fracture is not much studied. So this ductile fracture here is not much studied when compared to the brittle fracture, because the ductile fracture is preceded by, as the characteristic differences between the ductile and brittle, the ductile fracture is preceded by a significant amount of plastic deformation. So in an application, when you have a material that will exhibit a ductile fracture or a failure that is preceded by the significant amount of plastic deformation, then once the material begins to deform, you have a fair amount of idea that this material would eventually fail, and it gives us sufficient time to replace that particular component in an application. And that is the reason why in an ambient condition the ductile fracture is not extensively studied. More of a focus is given to the brittle failure, because brittle failure is rather instantaneous and it is catastrophic. And when compared to the brittle failure, since ductile fracture gives a sufficient amount of warning, it is not studied in the ambient conditions largely. Now, when you want to characterize the formation of the fracture during the ductile fracture, or when you want to give the sequence of events that leads to the ductile fracture, it begins with the plastic deformation. So this is not something new. Any material that is ductile in nature, or any crystalline material, when imposed to a mechanical condition or imposed to a definite amount of load, it begins to plastically deform, after, of course, after certain limit. Now, the initiation of the ductile fracture, in addition to the plastic deformation, begins with the geometrical change in the material. So when you impose a mechanical condition to a material, of course, after a certain limit, it begins to deform plastically, but it does not stay with the plastic deformation, but it begins to change the geometry of the material. After a certain limit, or certain amount of load, the material begins to change geometrically. And this geometrical change, we refer for a condition of uniaxial loading. When you have a uniaxial loading and you have a conventional sample with cylindrical cross section, this geometrical change, when you have a conventional sample with a circular cross section, this geometrical change appears in the form of the reduction in the cross sectional area. This we refer to as the necking. So in addition, or after the sufficient amount of plastic deformation, under a mechanical loading condition, the material begins to change geometrically, and this geometrical change for a uniaxial loading condition, for a conventional specimen with a sample with a circular cross section, it is observed in the form of the reduction in the cross sectional area. This we refer to as the necking. So these are the first two events in the sequence of events that leads to the failure of the material. So first is the plastic deformation, the other is the necking, which is nothing but the geometrical or macroscopically visible geometrical change in the dimensions of the material. Now once you have necking, what happens is the uniaxial loading condition, which is imposed externally, changes to a triaxial loading condition locally with around the necking region. So even though externally you impose a uniaxial loading condition, or you impose a uniaxial tensile loading, in the region wherein the cross-sectional area is reduced, a region wherein you have the necking appear, in that region you have a triaxial loading condition. To put it simply, in that region all the loads will be focused. Before necking, the deformation introduced by the uniaxial loading will largely be uniform. The shift in the atoms will largely be uniform, particularly in the specific slip planes. You have the shift in the atoms that are largely uniform. However, once the necking begins, the cross-sectional area of the material begins to decrease in a specific region, then the deformation or the influence of load becomes confined to that region, and there is a shift from the uniaxial loading condition to the triaxial loading condition. And this shift or this increase in the effect of load locally leads to the formation of cavities. So once the influence of load, rather than being focused or rather than being distributed uniformly all over the material, once it gets focused on a specific region of reduced cross section, and the nature of the loading condition also gets exceedingly complex in that local region, you have the formation of cavities. and these cavities now begin to grow under the hydrostatic stress condition. So under the influence of the hydrostatic stress, this hydrostatic stress, if you could recollect your fundamental understanding of mechanical behavior, this hydrostatic stress is known to introduce the change in the volume of the material, meaning it is known just to influence or the affect the material in an elastic manner. However, once the cavities are formed due to the complex loading condition in the necking or the increased influence of load in a confined region, once the cavities are formed, these cavities are then driven to growth by the hydrostatic stress that is imposed on the material. So under the influence of this hydrostatic stress, these cavities begins to grow and they coalesce. So you have the formation of cavities because that is due to the formation of necking, and once you have necking or once you have the cavities of sufficient number of cavities, they begin to grow because of the conditions, mechanical condition that is still being imposed, and these cavities, they grow and coalesce with each other, and it ultimately leads to the formation of the central crack. Now once you have this central crack, the growth of this central crack leads ultimately to the failure of the material. So in at an ambient temperature or in an ambient condition, the failure of the material, particularly the ductile failure of the material, it begins with the plastic deformation and it gets intensified by the necking, and once you have necking, and due to the necking you have the change in the condition that is operating in this localized region, this region wherein the cross-sectional area is reduced, and because of this change in the loading condition and the localized influence of the stress, you have formation of cavities, and these cavities, due to the continuing persistence of the stress that is imposed on the material, so the continued stress that is being applied on the material, due to this continuous stress, particularly the hydrostatic components of it, which brings about the volumetric change in the material, these cavities, they begin to grow and they begin to coalesce with one another, and ultimately leading to the formation of central crack. And this central crack begins to propagate since we continue imposing the mechanical condition, ultimately leading to the failure of the material. Now if you could consider this graphically, you would have your necking region, and in this region you have the cavities forming in this manner. So meaning, in general sense, or when you consider the perspective like this, like more or less close to a macroscopic perspective, we are not talking in terms of the internally or at the microscopic scale. When you take a view like this, a generalized view like this, to understand the formation of cracks or the failure of ductile materials at ambient temperature, the formation of these cavities, the nucleation of cavities is confined to this region, to the necking region, and it's perpendicular to the loading or the direction of the tensile loading, and it appears as though this is homogeneous in nature. The reason we can say this to be homogeneous in nature, because you don't see in this particular necking region, you don't see a specific areas. In general case, you don't see a specific area wherein you have the nucleation of cavities. You have cavities that largely occur in a specific region. Of course, they are focused in this region. So in this region, there is, or it appears as though the nucleation of cavities is homogeneous. However, this is a localized consideration. However, when you consider the behavior of the material as a whole, then the nucleation of cavities is heterogeneous. So in a general sense, nucleation of the cavities, which ultimately coalesce to form the crack, which ultimately leads to the failure of the material. When you talk locally it might appear homogeneous. It might be confined to this specific region, and in this specific region, irrespective of a grain or the grain boundary, this cavities begin to nucleate. It might appear as homogeneous. However, when you consider the whole of the system, even the necking region, you could see that this cavities or the nucleation of it is heterogeneous in nature. Now, we have just considered the mechanisms or different stages that leads to the formation of ductile fracture at ambient temperature. Now, depending on the regions where these cavities form and the propagation of these cavities or the propagation of the cracks that ultimately form from these cavities, we refer to the failure or the fracture as, or we classify the fractures as intergranular and intragranular. So these two classifications are not a macroscopic classification, but rather a classification based on microscopic observation. So while ductile and brittle fracture, or the classification of fracture into ductile and brittle, are a macroscopic classification, the intergranular and intragranular are microscopic classification. So what this name is rather self-explanatory, meaning the intergranular fractures, in this mode the cavities are formed between two different grains and along the grain boundaries. Formation, growth and coalescence of the cavities, which ultimately leads to the crack, is along the grain boundaries. So all the mechanisms that we observed that ultimately leads to the ductile failure of the material, that is cavity formation and growth and coalescence of the cavities, then ultimately that leads to the formation of crack and its propagation, it is confined to the grain boundary region, and this ultimately leads to the intergranular failure or intergranular fracture. Now, as opposed to this, the large role played by the grain boundary or events largely confined to the grain boundaries, when all these events occur within the grain, you have the intergranular or intragranular fracture. So when you have the cavities formation, the coalescence and the growth of cavities leading to the formation of crack and ultimately the growth of crack within the grain, you would have the intragranular fracture, and if it is along the grain boundary, you would have intergranular fracture. Now, the intergranular and the intragranular, they are evident by considering the crack propagation path. Now, the intergranular, the crack propagates along the grain boundaries, whereas in intragranular, the crack propagates through the grains. So now what we have considered is the mechanism that is responsible for the ductile failure at ambient temperature. Now, the ductile failure, the reason we focus on ductile failure is because even at the extreme condition of stress rupture, we see there is a sufficient amount of plastic deformation that is exhibited by the material at high temperature, even though the material fails at correspondingly low time duration. And therefore, our focus is exclusively on the ductile failure. Now, the ductile failure, it comprises of different stages: formation of cavities, the growth and coalescence of the cavities, formation of cracks, which ultimately leads to the formation of cracks, and the propagation of cracks, and that leads to the failure of the material. Now, depending on the operation of this mechanism, if it is confined to the grain boundaries, we have intergranular failure wherein the crack propagation and the formation of crack is along the grain boundaries. If not, if the formation of cavities and ultimately the formation of cracks occur within the grain and even the propagation of crack is within the grain, we have intergranular failure. So this is just the brush up of our understanding on the fracture or failure of the material at ambient temperature. Now let us confine or let us move into the failure of materials during creep. So let us now move into the failure of material during creep, wherein in addition to the stress condition that we impose, there is a role played by the temperature. So first we need to understand, in creep we don't increase the stress or the mechanical condition like we do for the ambient testing. So in general cases wherein we study about the failure of the material or the fracture of the material, it is in the framework of stress, strain or the tensile testing. So when you consider or when you study the behavior or the fracture of the material or failure of a material during tensile testing, so it characteristically involves a continual increase in stress. Even though there might be after the ultimate testing point a decrease in the stress, when you consider the true stress strain curve, you would see that there is a continual increase in the stress, or you keep on varying the mechanical condition that you impose during tensile testing. So this is how you would study the failure of the material at ambient temperature. However, when we consider creep, in addition to the influence of high temperature, we have a condition that means that is different from that of the tensile loading condition. That is, even though the direction of loading is similar to that of the tensile, the stress that we impose is constant all through the creep testing process. So these are the factors that differentiate the general consideration of the failure of the material under tensile testing when you compare it with creep. Now let us see what are the similarities that we observe when you compare the creep fracture or the failure of the material at high temperature to that of the ambient temperature, even when you have a tensile or increasingly tensile loading condition or increasingly or varying stress condition and the constant stress condition. So you compare, what we are essentially doing is we are comparing the failure of a ductile material during tensile testing and the creep testing, and we are just comparing or looking for the similarities. The first similarity is the overall mechanism. So the overall mechanism for the material to fail under a creep testing condition, the constant stress and the temperature, the overall mechanism, it is reflective of the mechanism that we observe at the ambient temperature during tensile testing, meaning it begins with the formation of cavities that leads to the formation of cracks. So this, we have coalescence happening here, and that ultimately leads to the formation of cracks, and this crack propagates and ultimately leading to the failure of the material. This overall scheme of things, the overall mechanism remains conserved for both creep failure and also the ductile failure at room temperature. For both the failure at the ambient temperature with increasing stress condition and the failure at high temperature with constant stress condition, the overall mechanism remains the same, both being the ductile failure. Secondly, one other similarity is the nucleation of cavities is also heterogeneous in the creep testing process. While we are considering the high temperature constant stress condition, the formation of cavities that leads to the formation of crack is heterogeneous even when you compare it with the ambient temperature. Like the ambient temperature, even at high temperature, the formation of cavities is heterogeneous. It looks for a specific region where these cavities are favorable, and in those regions only the cavities are formed. They are not homogeneously formed all throughout the material. They are specific, or there are specific sites wherein the cavities nucleate similar to the ones we observe in the ambient condition. Now these are the two major similarities. So we have a similarity in the mechanism and we have the similarity in the nucleation of these cavities. The nucleation behavior of these cavities. Now let us look further into, or let us exclusively focus on the formation of cavities during high temperature or during the creep testing of the materials. So let us, instead of comparing or relating each of these steps, now let us exclusively focus on the behavior or the failure of the material during creep testing. Now at high temperature, the distinction or the characteristic failure of the material begins with this heterogeneous nature of the nucleation. Now when we consider that the cavities that leads to the formation of cracks, they nucleate heterogeneously in or during the creep testing. The heterogeneity in the nucleation of these cavities is rather we can observe, or it is rather characteristic of the creep behavior. So what we mean by that is, this heterogeneity is largely focused on a particular region of the material. So when you observe the formation of cavities at high temperature, they are largely confined to the grain boundaries. So the cavities, when compared or when you focus exclusively on the high temperature failure of the material, the cavities largely form along the grain boundaries. Now there are different mechanisms that are responsible for the cavities being formed along the grain boundaries, and that would be extensively discussed in the next lecture. But here it is important to note that the cavities or the formation of or the nucleation of these cavities are largely confined to the grain boundaries. So that means the mechanism or the category of failure that is largely operational at high temperature is the intergranular failure. So what you observe when you compare the two different modes of failure or two different modes of crack propagation, you would see that when compared to the intragranular failure at high temperature, the intergranular failure is more pronounced. And this is primarily because the cavities that initiate the overall failure of the material is largely confined to the grain boundaries. And because of this formation or localized formation of cavities, you ultimately end up having the intergranular failure of the material. Now, there are several reasons that can be attributed to the formation of cavities along the grain boundaries. So one of the reasons, if you could recollect, when we consider the one creep mechanism wherein there was a gradient in the vacancies. So when you have a gradient in the vacancies, we saw that along the direction or the region wherein the tensile loading is acting, the activation energy for the formation of vacancy is considerably reduced, and this means that in that specific region wherein the tensile loading is active, you have a considerable amount of vacancies that are being formed. So when you have a region wherein the tensile loading is extensively imposed, in that region you have increased number of vacancies. And now considering that there is a complementing compressive region in a nearby location, these increased amount of vacancies usually diffuses to that neighboring region wherein there is a deficiency of vacancies. However, when the rate of transport is reduced, however, there is some sort of a obstacle that will not allow this vacancy to move from this increased or the tensile region to that compressive region, then these vacancies, they lead to the formation of cavities. And therefore, these cavities are largely confined to the grain boundaries. Now, this behavior is largely because of the inability of the vacancies to move from the tensile loaded region to the compressive loaded region. To reiterate, what we observe is the formation of the increased amount of vacancies that are not able to move from their point of origin. Now we have seen that when you have a tensile loading region or when you have an increased tensile loading in a specific region, the activation energy that is required for the formation of vacancies is considerably reduced, and this leads to the increased amount of vacancies. And this vacancies, they move from that increased amount to a lower region because of the gradient that is being introduced. Now, if there is any obstacle that prevents this diffusion of vacancies, then you would have a considerable increase or continual increase in the amount of vacancies that leads to the formation of cavities. And since the nucleation site for the vacancies are largely the grain boundaries, you would have the formation of cavities along the grain boundaries. Now this is because we have the nucleation of vacancies, particularly the activation energy that required for the nucleation of vacancies is low at the grain boundaries. You would have an increased amount of number of vacancies or increased amount of vacancies along the grain boundaries that leads to the formation of the cavities along the grain boundaries. This is one explanation of why we have an increased, or we have a specific nature or a specific form of cavities in the high temperature failure of the material. So we have the cavities forming along the grain boundaries. So one of the reason is because of the increased formation or increased amount of vacancies that are produced in the region wherein we experience the tensile loading condition. So this is one of the reasons why we observe the formation of cavities along the grain boundaries that ultimately lead to the intergranular cracks and the propagation, and ultimately that leads to the intergranular failure of the materials. So far what we have seen is that we have considered the different, or we have considered the mechanism of ductile failure. We have seen that there is a similarity between the ductile failure or the failure that we observe during the creep test to that of the ductile failure that we observe at the room temperature, even though the stress condition that we impose is quite different. In tensile loading we have a increased or increasing stress condition. In case of creep we have a constant stress condition. Despite the difference in the temperature and the loading condition, we observe that there are some similarities. One is the overall sequence of the failure of the material. The other is the heterogeneity in the formation of cavities. Now we saw that in creep or in high temperature failure of the material, this heterogeneity is largely restricted to the grain boundaries, and that this characterizes the failure of the material at high temperature. So when your formation of or the nucleation of cavities is largely restricted to the grain boundaries, then the coalescence of these cavities, which leads to the crack and ultimately the failure of the material, is then also confined to the grain boundaries, and that means that the intergranular failure is largely pronounced at high temperature. Now we saw one of the reasons for this is because when you have a tensile loading condition, or when you have a region wherein it experiences a large amount of tensile loading, then the activation energy that is required for the formation of vacancies is considerably reduced, and this reduction in the activation energy increases the number of vacancies. These vacancies, since they are largely formed along the grain boundaries because of the reduced activation energy along the grain boundaries when compared to the bulk of the grains, so this leads to the formation of cavities along the grain boundaries that coalesce and leads to the formation of intergranular cracks that ultimately leads to the intergranular failure of the material. So this is one reason or one mechanism that leads to the formation of intergranular cracks at high temperature. So in the subsequent lectures, we will look into the other mechanisms that can lead to the formation of the intergranular cavities that ultimately leads to the intergranular failure of the material. So with this discussion on comparing the ductile failure to that of the high temperature failure despite the difference in the loading condition, and the the one factor that characterizes one failure mechanism that is largely observed at the creep or high temperature, which is nothing but the intergranular failure. With this, I would like to wind this lecture, and in the subsequent lectures we will focus on the mechanism that leads to the formation of these intergranular or the intergranular failure or the formation of cavities within or along the grain boundary. So different mechanisms that causes the formation of cavities or cracks within the grain boundaries or along the grain boundaries we will see in the subsequent lecture. So goodbye.